Hello and welcome, I'm Martine Croxall. The United States says it's involved in intensive diplomatic efforts to prevent the conflict from Israel and Hezbollah escalating further. The comments come after explosions triggered in pagers and walkie-talkies used by Hezbollah killed at least 32 people and injured thousands. The leader of Hezbollah, which some Western states have designated a terrorist organisation, is expected to address the events in a speech later today. Israel hasn't confirmed it was behind the blast, yet the Defence Minister Yoav Gallant said that it's opening a new phase in the war, with the centre of gravity shifting to the north. Our correspondent Simon Jones reports.
A funeral in southern Lebanon is about to be interrupted. An explosion injuring a Hezbollah soldier, causing panic and fear. In Beirut, another blast caused by a walkie-talkie, a new form of technological warfare. Seen too at this mobile phone shop in the city of Sidon, where several devices went off. Communication weaponized. On Tuesday, it was pagers used by Hezbollah that were exploding, old-school technology that the group turned to recently because it feared its mobile phones could be tracked. But it's thought the supply of pagers was intercepted and tiny amounts of high explosive hidden inside. Among the dead were 2 children. Hezbollah has blamed Israel. It hasn't commented, but Israel's defence minister has said this.
I
believe that we are at the start of a new phase in the war and we must adapt. The centre of gravity is moving towards the north. This means that we are diverting forces, resources and energy towards the north.
Israel has released this footage of its troops training near the Lebanese border. A second division of the army has moved to the area, leading to growing fears of all-out war. Hezbollah, backed by Iran, has been trading far with Israel across the border since last October. Hezbollah's leader is due to give a speech today in which he may indicate what the group will do next. The US is urging restraint.
We want to see the war end. And everything we've been doing since the beginning has been designed to prevent the conflict from escalating. We still believe, for instance, that there is a diplomatic path forward, that particularly up near Lebanon.
In Beirut, the security forces carry out a controlled explosion on a pager outside a hospital. All devices are seen as a potential threat. A diplomatic path to peace won't be easy to tread. Simon Jones, BBC News.
Lebanon has now banned walkie-talkies and pagers from all flights out of the country's only commercial airport in operation. Attention has now turned to the walkie-talkies themselves and how the explosions were possible. Well, this is what we know. The Japanese firm ICOM says it's investigating reports the devices bear its logo. It said production of the model stopped 10 years ago and added that manufacturing of its batteries has also stopped. Well, the company ICOM described the model as a handheld radio which was exported to the Middle East from 2004 to 2014 and hasn't shipped since then. ICOM also said it isn't possible to confirm whether the walkie-talkies that are exploded were bought directly from ICOM or via a distributor. Well, there's been fresh cross-border violence between Israel and Hezbollah. Israeli media are reporting at least 5 civilians have been injured in a Hezbollah rocket attack. A correspondent in Jerusalem, Yolande Nell, gave us her analysis of Israel declaring a new phase in the war.
Well, it's really not clear if he is expecting Israel now to go into an all-out war with Hezbollah in Lebanon, or if this is merely a new focus on Israel's northern border with Lebanon. Certainly, we know that a division of the Israeli military that was recently fighting in Gaza has now been transferred to that northern region. There are additional reservists being sent there and other military resources. What we've heard repeatedly from Israeli leaders over the past week is that they are committed to this new war goal that they have set of returning tens of thousands of Israeli civilians to their homes. They have been displaced by the fighting with Hezbollah over the past 11 months. That has really gone on in parallel to the war in Gaza. And, the previous talk has been of the need to push Hezbollah away from Israel's border, perhaps through a small-scale ground assault.
There have been multiple warnings from the international community over the last few months for there to be no further escalation. How much pressure then is Israel going to come under, particularly from the United States?
Well, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has just been in the region. He's leaving it today for discussions with European counterparts about what's going on here. And he hasn't, on this occasion, come back to Israel. We've had the Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant speaking to Lloyd Austin, the US Defence Secretary. The readout from the Pentagon really, repeating that the US remains very committed to Israel's security when it comes to dealing with the likes of Hezbollah and other Iranian proxies in this region. But we're really waiting now to see what is announced by the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah when it comes to his speech later in the day. Since the war in Gaza started, really his speeches have been closely listened to around this region for clues of what his organisation, it's a very powerful, well-armed organisation, is likely to do. In the past, he has talked about really acting in solidarity with Hamas in Gaza, and he has said that if there was a Gaza ceasefire deal, then the latest round of rocket fire by Hezbollah into Israel would stop. Now, on this occasion, the reading in the Israeli media is really very much that his organisation has been so humiliated by what's happened. There have been hundreds of Hezbollah operatives who have been wounded, and so this is likely to lead to a more powerful response.
Yolande now in Jerusalem. We've been speaking to Nadim Khouri, Executive Director at the Arab Reform International Team think tank. He told us that panic is setting in amongst the Lebanese population.
Look, the last 48 hours, people lived through terror. The constant sounds of ambulances in the streets, the images of overflowing hospitals. And you have to remember that people went through, after the Beirut port explosion in August 4th, something very similar in scale. So high levels of fear, high levels of concerns about what happens tomorrow, and also a great sense of uncertainty because people have been hit in their intimacy. Because everyone talks about, oh, this was a very targeted, precise attack. But actually what happened for people in Lebanon is that in the middle of the afternoon, thousands of devices started exploding. Now, these devices were issued to Hezbollah members, but these Hezbollah members were part of society. So some of them were shopping, some of them were on the streets, some of them were actually driving cars and motorbikes. So, people just felt suddenly their entire sense of security dissolved. So high levels of fear, high levels of concern amidst constant escalating threats from Israel.
We are expecting a speech by the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah later in the day. Just what might he need to say, given how destabilised his organisation would appear to be?
It's true. Hezbollah is in a bind. They've made it very clear over the last few months that they don't want an escalating war, that they are tying the quiet at the border to the situation in Gaza. And even when there was an assassination of one of their key leaders, Shukr, a few weeks ago, they decided not to escalate by attacking civilians. They know if they escalate right now, that this will put, this is what actually Israel wants to invade Lebanon. On the other hand, there's clearly pressure on them to reestablish a form of mutual deterrence, which has existed between Hezbollah and Israel since 2006. And by the way, which in large part kept the border very quiet until October of last year. So they're in a bind. I don't expect them to rush into a decision. Clearly, Nasrallah will have to first speak to his supporters, to, in a way, calm them, comfort them, give them confidence. But one thing Hezbollah has been good at in the past, and I think this is something they've learned from the Iranians, is they will probably take their time to first figure out how they've been infiltrated to that level, and to decide operationally what they can do. There will be issues, I'm sure they will have to say things like, we will have to retaliate, vengeance is coming. But I fear that any escalation in the coming days and weeks is more likely to come from the Israeli side. And I think here the US has not been playing the role of moderator. Despite all their statements that they want quiet at the border, in a way, they have been supporting, financing, giving intel to the Israelis since October 7th.
Nadeem Houri from the Arab Reform Initiative team think tank speaking to us earlier. Well, with Lebanon on edge, our correspondent Hugo Bachega gave us the latest from Beirut.
This is a massive humiliation for Hezbollah. This is the worst security breach in the group's history, and 2 days of attacks, targeted devices being used by members of the group. This shows that Israel has managed to penetrate the group's communication network. So it is a very difficult reality for Hezbollah right now, how to respond to these attacks, not only in terms of retaliation, but also how to adapt to this new reality. So again, Hassan Nasrallah, the powerful Hezbollah leader, is going to make a speech later today, his first public reaction since those attacks. And I think many people will be watching this speech to see any kind of indication of how the group is planning to respond. Hezbollah has vowed to retaliate after these attacks, blaming Israel for these explosions that happened across the country. And again, real fears here of a possible escalation in this conflict between Hezbollah and Israel. We saw yesterday that the Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant said that his country was at the start of a new phase in this war. So again, concerns that this conflict that has been by and large contained to areas along the border could escalate into a major confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah.
You have to question how targeted these attacks have been when you look at the sheer number of civilians and children as well who've been affected and maimed by these explosions.
Exactly, and this has been the source of a lot of anger in the country because of the extent of these attacks. Some of these devices exploded as people were in shops, as people were at home with their families. And obviously there has been a lot of chaos and confusion. Yesterday, I was in southern Beirut when one of those explosions happened. There was panic because many people believed that no electronic device was safe. Hezbollah members were stopping us, telling us, don't use your phone, don't use your camera. One of our producers received a message from a friend saying that she was changing her Lebanese SIM card to an international one because she was concerned that her phone could explode. So I think this gives you a sense of the feeling across the country. So there was shock as a result of those attacks, but also a lot of anger because hundreds of people have been injured, a lot of people with severe eye, hand, facial injuries as well. So there is a widespread anger as a result of those attacks that happened in several locations across the country.